I'm Veronica, and I make people cry for a living. One thing that it's important for you to know is that I am an immigrant. My life and my career have influenced each other with little notes dictated by my decision of leave my home country and come to this country where we come from everywhere in the world. Also, I am the recipient of deep personal secrets, not only when I work as a psychotherapist, but also when people feel comfortable sharing them with me. So let's question, why do people make decisions, in particularly moving to a different country or a different state? What is the process of adaptation when people relocate? If we look at the definition of adapt, it is to make fit as for a new use, often by modification. But what does that mean in real life? I mean, how can we understand it? Well, basically, adaptation doesn't happen when we start modifying things. It is when we start thinking about it, analyzing, and pondering our options. We review what kind of support we have, and we see what options do we have. And later, we see that a lot of elements have to come together in order for us to adapt, and that cannot be easy. But I guarantee you that when you turn around and see everything that you went through to be where you are, every single element you went through makes sense. So my experience working with immigrants has been a mix between coincidence, faith, and calling. I was in New York on 9/11. I had just finished my master's degree in psychology, and I was looking for a job. So I made the decision to go and volunteer and help the victims. And due to my background and my education, I was able to provide crisis intervention and co-lead a support group. Also, during this time, I was able to see that in the towers and the surrounding areas, there were so many immigrants working and helping people. That truly let me know that this country is built and lived by people from all over the world. And also during this time, I was able to see that their story did not start on September the 11th. Since then, every time I work with an immigrant, I ask them where they are and how they came here. I want to know the why, when, and how they immigrated here. We are a world that has a globalized mentality, right? And we never ask that question, even as many of us have become citizens of the world. It is that taboo question that is so hard for us to ask and to find out the story of each one of us. And if we think about this part, I can tell you that it is important that we get to know the story of each of us. And asking them sometimes is really, really hard. So as an international student, when I was living in New York, I remember hearing all the experiences from my friends and everybody I knew there. I found out that what they have lived through has shaped who they are. And listening to the stories, I had one of my dearest friends share her story with me. And I can tell you that her story is one of those pivotal moments in my life that changed me forever. Her parents have emigrated from Eastern Europe in the late 70s, and she was left behind. She was ecstatic to tell me everything, and she could not believe that somebody really wanted deep and learn her story. So she really had a hard time while she was living there because she was alone with her aunt who was used to take care of her. So basically what happened is her parents told her they were gonna go get bread, and then they escaped. She did not come to the country until many years later. She was sent on a plane by herself when she was still very young as an unaccompanied minor. And she would tell me the story like a casual fact in her life, but I knew deep down inside that her fascination for cakes was related to those early years living in her home country where sugar was so scarce. So when they ask me about my immigration story, I always tell people that I have an easy way out. I married an American, and we decided to raise our kids here. But anybody who is an immigrant knows that there's not an easy answer. Immigration takes courage, persistence, and giving up so much, but gaining so much at the same time. My husband and I knew that when we got married that either one of us or both of us would have to be an immigrant because we come from different countries. And let me tell you something. He had lived in Mexico too, as I have lived here. So we both have that experience that I think that has enriched our relationship because he understands what I go through as I understood what he went through. And our kids did that too. So that's really funny, right? Because if you think about kids being immigrants, we never think about that change that they're going to be doing. But it's very enriching when somebody was born in a country and has the culture from another. They really, really merge and become their own self. So one of the important things that I always tell people is that I want to know their story, as I was telling you. So knowing my story, I think about these people. But unfortunately, when I ask them, they always tell me that their story is like everyone else. And when I ask for details, like how do you get here, they tell me like everyone else. And I always think about this part because I tell them, I don't know how everybody else got here. I have heard everything, by plane, by bus, walking the bridge, going with a coyote, be transferred as a student, or your job brought you here, or my parents brought me as a child. It was not my decision. And this is why when people cannot tell me their story, I really want to go deep because I understand that their own personal story is really important and is something that I need to understand in order to understand why are they here and what happened to them before. Leon and Rebecca Grimberg talk about the importance of understanding all the factors that come in intertwined when somebody immigrates. It is housing, it is food, it is support system, if it's the culture similar, if you speak the language, if you have people that are going to support you there, if you had to leave. And we can make at least a long, long, long list with as many elements as we can think of personalities. So that list is long. But one of the things that every immigration story has in common is that it's going to trigger anxiety. Even when an immigration process is done the easy way out, there are situations that are going to provoke some kind of trauma and leave some psychological and emotional scars. And one of the things that we take in consideration when we work with immigrants is their psychological characteristics that get challenged when we are emigrating. And that's why when I was living in LA, the first time I came here as an international student, back in the day, 1997, he used to tell me I just made the big mistake. I changed my life forever. Because he was second generation and his father used to tell him that the biggest thing that a person has to encounter in their life is knowing the life in two different places. Because no matter what you do, you were always going to miss something you left behind in the other place. And, you know, I can understand this, right? Because I have heard things like, oh, I left my career, I left my family, the house I grew up, the things I like, making last-minute plans, making friends in a different way. But also, I have heard things like, there was no food. We didn't know when we were going to have power or water. I didn't know if I had to go to work or get in line to get certain kind of food or certain kind of product. Or we had to leave in the middle of the night just with the bare minimum because of the situation in their lives. So that's why when I work with somebody who has a big trauma, I ask them for them to tell me about that immigration story. and ask them why they feel that something as small as what happened to them makes them feel so bad. Because I know they sometimes tell me, I have overcome so much more in my life. Why with this little thing I'm not feeling good? And I can tell you from the work I have done, it is not necessarily that they have resolved what happened in the past. They push it, they ignore it, and they go again. So this thing becomes really, really big. And it's when I have to go deep down and see if what they live was a trauma itself, a process of trauma, or a traumatic process, or if the trauma started before. And this is very important when we live with people, because as a therapist, I have to explain to them what's going on. And understanding when you work with people who have severe trauma, it's very hard because we have to tiptoe around what happened to them, understand when and what happened to them. And then once we understand, we need to teach them to forgive themselves because it was not their fault what happened to them. And this is really hard because everybody thinks that for a reason or not, it is their fault. And going through this process is very important because we are going to transform them from victims to survivors. And everybody has like a fear of talking about this victim word. We hate it. I hate the word victim, but I hate it in the way, the connotation it has, because I know from working with people that have been victims of many things that at the end of the day, when you're a victim, you're using absolutely everything that you have inside in order to overcome this new situation in your life. And one of the important things that we need to be aware is that for a victim to become a survivor, they cannot do it by themselves. They need the help of their community and their loved ones. So what happens when we close the door in a new place? What do we bring behind? What stays behind? What do we bring with us? How do we decide how to start our life? Because I have relocated 4 times. And you would think that the 4th one would be the easiest one, right? Well, let me tell you, it was the hardest one. Because I was older, I had 2 kids, a husband, and 2 beagles. I love my beagles, but that's a total different story. And honestly, as soon as, and we barely knew anybody. I mean, we had a couple of people who help us, and they help us a lot, but at the end of the day, we were alone here. So I had to be making sure everybody was settled in, their needs met, and we adapt here. And I was the last one to take care of myself. And it is really important to know that, because when we immigrate, we don't have time to see what we left behind, grieve our loss, understand what we need. We really need to go 100 miles per hour trying to figure this one out. So one of the things that happens when we come to a new place is we try to figure it out all. We try to figure it out. How to put your house. You look for 100 things that you're used to, and you want to have things that are familiar and similar to what you like. And let me tell you something, it is hard. Because you go to a grocery store for the first time, and it's amazing. I mean, who has been to a Walmart that has not born here? I mean, you go there and you're like, what is this, right? And you spend hours, and it's fascinating, and it's fun, and it's incredible, but you want to get your things. I want to get my tortillas, and I want to get the things I like. But I also want to start eating barbecue and all these things that are amazing, right? So you can go into the grocery store, spend thousands of hours looking at toilet paper. And it's a great guessing game, guys, because toilet paper is something you're either going to love or hate. So one of the things that happened to me, when I think about this situation where we don't know how to overcome something, how to relocate, I used to lead a support group of women that came from all over the world. And these women came from different ages and used to have a great sense of community and meet every week. And one of the amazing things about this group of women is that they, oldest one, would see beauty and possibility in the young ones, and the young ones would see that the older ones were already settled in and that the problems were not crucial. And people who grew up in this country were eager to know everything about this country and what these people came across and what they're able to achieve. But also they were so generous to help this woman adapt and know how things were done here. So for me, it was amazing to see this group of women come together and support each other. Brené Brown talks about the need for connection. And in order to be able to connect with one another, we need to be vulnerable. And tell me, what can be more vulnerable than a therapeutic group of women? And that literally gave me hope, because if you could see that this brave group of women who were going through a lot were able to connect through their own vulnerability and share their own personal story, I think we can do it as regular human beings. So what happens when we move? I mean, it has been debated that people who are bilingual have two personalities. We have read it, right? It's not clear if it's true or not true. I believe that we have a language where we feel comfortable and we adapt with the other one. I always think about this on my first months living in New York City, walking on the busy streets, surrounded by people, and alone, but with a comforting feeling inside of me. I love that feeling, and every time I can, and I go back, I go by myself to New York City. So don't tell me you want to come with me, because I don't like going with people. It's my place. And also, this makes me think of my last time in Mexico City. I was just finishing having a beautiful breakfast with one of my dearest friends, and we were going for a walk. And from a car, a dear friend came, old friend, just to say hi to me. And that felt amazing. And don't get me wrong, both places are home to me. But I believe that now, in North Texas, I have found a place where I have a 50-50 chance to bump into someone or just be minding my own business. Hey, sometimes we need that, right? But during my work with immigrants, as an immigrant myself, I have found that everything that we face and we go through helps us adapt into this new reality. People tend to group with people that are similar and have a similar background. But from a personal story and what I worked, I can tell you that this sometimes is not the answer, because we all bring our own personal story, and that is so unique to each one of us. And I believe that adapting to a new place, it is like looking for something is like finding the Wizard of Oz at the end of the yellow brick road. Once you get there, you realize that all the elements of what you need were around you the whole time. Gracias.